Well, hello boys and girls. Welcome back to another chapter in the story of Mr. Mousey and his friend Mr. Rabbit in Mr. Mousey Beyond the Silver Sea. So we're on to chapter 22. Let's get straight into it and see what happens. The Stone House. The dragon was still howling and roaring, more in a white rage now than in actual pain. The area around itself was a mess of broken trees and upturned earth, and smoke curled up high in the air from where it had blasted all around itself in an attempt to destroy its invisible enemy. Pulling out the blade angered it all the more, if that was possible, as it came to the conclusion that the attacker was no less than the mouse with its cutlass. Although the weapon had indeed gone deep into the creature's eye, the effect was actually less than you might have imagined. Its vision was now fairly blurred in its right eye, and a long white scar was to develop and remain throughout the rest of its abominable life. But apart from that, and the jabbing pain, the creature was in surprisingly good shape. Certainly good enough shape to get itself airborne again and begin a search for the mouse that it had no intention of playing with again. Instant death was, in fact, what it now intended. It flew over the forest in ever-widening circles at tree-top height, its head dipping through the canopy below, as you might dip your head in the bath, and at least one of its eyes remained sharp enough to spot anything suspicious below. It was as the beast circled that the three heard it smash and roar by overhead. Had the house been out in the open, then, well, without doubt, it would have investigated. But hidden below the overhang, the stone house remained unseen, and the stock-still occupants within were passed over without so much as a puff of smoke. Even after the thrashing and beating of wings could no longer be heard, no one spoke for a good 10 minutes. Eventually, Mr. Rabbit whispered, "I think it's gone, I think. All I can hear is the river." The three of them were still standing upright in the middle of the room. Nogger had managed to rise when Mr. Rabbit had gone in search of his friend. There was an uncertain pause. Then Mr. Mousey threw his arm around the rabbit. "Oh, Mr. Rabbit, you silly old thing, you could have been killed. But you saved my life. Thank you so much. You are a hero." Being called silly and a hero all in the one breath makes it difficult to know exactly how to respond, but the grinning rabbit just hugged back. "Me? A hero? What did I do? It was you that fought the dragon, single-handed combat against a dragon. Just wait till I tell old Billy and the rest of the woods." Now, pirates aren't really the hugging sort, but old Nogger could see he was missing out, so he wrapped his hairy arms around the both of them and almost cried for joy. "Oh, me mates, if I hadn't been here myself, I wouldn't have believed it. I'm in the actual presence of the two bravest, stoutest artist heroes of all time. I'm so happy as I could cry." Which he proceeded to do. After a good bit of relieved utterings and thankfulness and being totally unroasted, details were filled in by the three as to what had actually happened. "And when you threw your cutlass at the dragon, you blinded him for at least long enough for us to escape, and that was what saved me," the mouse was explaining to his friend. When I threw my cutlass?" questioned the bewildered rabbit. "Yes, just after I warned you to get down." "Just after you warned me to get down?" "Yes, and you lay on the ground, right down on the ground, and tossed your cutlass." "Lay down on the ground?" Mr. Rabbit just wasn't connecting with any of this at all. "Oh, Mr. Rabbit, stop sounding like a parrot," laughed Mr. Mousey. "Here, and what's wrong? "We're sounding like a pirate," said a slightly put-out voice of Nogger. "A parrot," said Mr. Mousey, "not pirate." Was there a parrot too?" asked Mr. Rabbit, who was finding this all a bit confusing. "What did it do?" No, there was no parrot," exclaimed Mr. Mousey, who was getting a little bit exasperated. "Excuse me," added Nogger, "I was here all along. I know I maybe didn't do much, but I was here." "Oh, I know you were here, Nogger, and glad we were and are of your company, but... So, was there or wasn't there a parrot, or doesn't it matter?" asked the confused voice of the rabbit, who was keen at least to sort out exactly what his own heroics had been. If you're going to have to stick your chest out for something, you may as well know what it is. It took a while, but eventually it all got explained. Mr. Rabbit was a little vague in explaining that he actually fell and dropped rather than threw the cutlass, but Mr. Mousey chose not to understand his unclear explanation in any case, so leaving it that Mr. Rabbit had felled the dragon, and that was satisfactory to all. Mr. Mousey and his friend rose even higher in the pirate's estimation after this, and he spent a good bit of his time afterwards in wonderment in being so blessed with such good company. About an hour after, it was clear that they were clear of the dragon altogether, and they began to take a bigger interest in their surroundings. They were in, well, a well-built little stone dwelling, furnished simply with a table, some wooden chairs, a fireplace, a tall dresser with shelves, and a number of pictures on the wall. The floor was wooden and evidently had a fireside rug at one time, for a rectangle of boards near to the fire were paler where once there had been a rug. The light from outside was beginning to fail, and the room began to cool. Since a wood pile lay just outside the door and enough smoke still lay about the forest from the earlier events, it was felt safe enough to light the fire. Mr. Mousey got this underway as Nogger, finding a jug in the dresser, went to fetch water from the river, tinkling in the still air. Mr. Rabbit dusted and cleaned the table and brought out some food from their packs. There were crushed rolls and, amazingly, an unbroken jar labelled "Soup for the Eating of." Mr. Mousey took out his saucepan, and soon the mouth-watering smell of vegetable broth crept up from the pan simmering over the fire. It was thickly made and was doubled in amount by Nogger adding some of the water from the river. Soon all three were gathered round the table, thanks gladly given, and the meal began. Like any meal, after an exciting day fighting dragons, it tasted like the absolute best ever. They finished the rolls, and the teapot replaced the saucepan. Mr. Mousey found some biscuits in his pack, and soon they were enjoying the calming effect of the tea and the sweetness of the biscuits. "Well, this is one of the homeliest little places we have been in for a long time," commented the little mouse. Nogger, well, he missed the swaying of the ocean swell, which he normally fell asleep to, but he admitted he knew what the mouse meant. "Here, Nogger, you can have my sleeping bag. I'll sleep on the rug," said Mr. Mousey, unrolling the sleeping bag. No, I'll be all right. He needs a rest. Old Nogger will be just fine." However, the little mouse insisted, and made it plain he would have it no other way. Soon the sleeping bags were out, and Mr. Mousey rolled out the slightly singed magic carpet in front of the fire. It was as he finished doing this that Mr. Rabbit perked up from the bag into which he had crawled and looked curiously over to his friend. "Well now, isn't that a funny thing?" He was looking at the rug. "What's that?" "The carpet. It fits exactly." Mr. Mousey had laid the magic carpet down on the floor just where the pale shadow left its mark in the floorboards where once it looked like a rug had been. Sure enough, the carpet exactly covered this shape to the very millimetre. Mr. Mousey turned his head from where he sat on the carpet and looked around. It was exact all the way round. Even the dim outline of the tassels could be made out on the floor where they ran along the short sides of the rug. "Looks like this here carpet has found its way home," said the rabbit, scratching his head for a moment before wriggling himself back into his sleeping bag. "It does seem funny, but I suppose most fireside rugs are about this size," said Mr. Mousey, dismissing the idea, or trying to. He actually found himself thinking about it a lot as he heard first Nogger, then Mr. Rabbit sleep into deep slumber. He himself remained awake for some time. He was actually thinking of just how many shapes fireside rugs do come in. Round, semicircle, oval, square, long rectangles, short ones, different sizes. Was there more to this, or was it just coincidence? As he looked around the room in the light of the flickering fire, he was struck too by how familiar the place looked. That he had never been here before he was sure of, yet it was as if he had seen it somewhere before, but where? One of the pictures on the wall was catching most of the light from the orange flames. The picture showed a forest, and in the distance a castle tower rose through the trees. Now, if that forest in the picture is this forest, then that could be the tower we're looking for. He had seen the similar scene in the book, and he tried to get asleep, satisfying himself that that is where he had seen the picture at least. Sometimes when you're trying too hard to remember something, it stubbornly refuses to be found. Just when you give up and relax your busy head is quite often the very moment when that very something pops up as clear as you like and gives you a surprise. So it was, as Mr. Mousey began to enter the gentle embrace of sleep, that his eyes suddenly opened wide as something slotted into place in his head. He had seen that picture before. It was in Owl's house. Owl's house. Well, sleep came soon after, but was filled with images of paintings of trees and castles, houses and ships. There were lots of questions, but those questions would come later. Well, that's the end of chapter 22 in the stone house, and some strange things that they're starting to see. This picture on the wall, how the rug fits, but we'll need to maybe read on to the next chapter to find out. So pop on the next YouTube at chapter 23 and we'll see what happens next. In the meantime, bye bye boys and girls, you take care and God bless.